but given this is essentially a spiritual sequel to Lost in Translation,
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting watching a film designed with some sort of commercial viability, because it was about a $20 million budget with a run that, won an Oscar.
Yeah.
This is clearly the level of filmmaking where making money is ideally part of the equation.
Yeah.
But to see something so personal, because you can clearly tell that given what the film is about, and given who the director, the writer and the director was, along with it being not so secret that the character John in Lost in Translation is definitely kind of Spike Jonze, or
Yeah.
at least what Coppola was projecting onto that character at the time.
Yes.
It's really interesting seeing two different filmmakers perceive themselves and each other in their own work.
Yeah.
And using these films as a very unique call and response. And there's something I found that was almost beautiful about these two films as this, because what got me was that neither film comes off as particularly bitter towards the other person.
Yeah.
And like, yes, in Lost in Translation, John he's distant, he's consumed with his work. He doesn't seem particularly interested in this sort of emotional struggle that I think Charlotte is the name of Scarlett Johansson's character.
Yes.
And it, so yeah, he may not be as interested in this emotional conflict, but he's not an asshole. He's not a horrible person.
Right.
The worst you could say is that he's distant and consumed with his work. And Catherine in Her,
Mm-hmm.
who was supposed to be the Coppola stand-in, like, she's driven. She is very successful.
Yeah.
She is portrayed in a way that I think is very fair. Sure, she snaps at him. She,
a little abrasive.
She's a little abrasive.
Yeah.
But she's also going through the process of divorcing her husband.
Yeah.
At a time where emotions are pretty strained.
Yeah.
And while she does have an outburst, Theodore also stops himself. If this is a Spike Jonze stand-in, he stops himself from saying something that he would really regret. Because I would argue watching this film that Spike Jonze knew this as well, that no matter how upset he may have been, he is still choosing to portray her in a manner that I would argue is fair.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a horrible person.
Right.
They're just not compatible for each other anymore.
Yeah.
And we also have all of these flashbacks that showcase that she is kind, that she is loving, that she's a good person. And that's how Theodore wants to remember her. And I think there's so much emotional maturity in both of these films, because at the end of the film, he also writes a letter in his own voice to Catherine, apologizing,
right,
and accepting his part to play in the divorce.
Mm-hmm.
There is, on a secondary level, as a call and response, as you could even say as a letter to Coppola herself. There's a lot of emotional maturity in both this film, but also in Lost in Translation,
Mm-hmm.
for two people accepting that they're not going to make it much longer and being adults about it. I think these are two really special films to me, that when you watch them in this manner, it makes you want to think about your own relationships as well, and think about what you could be doing better.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they intended for that, but once Spike Jonze made Her, I think it does become this thing that you can absolutely observe this between the two films.
Yeah,
And
and
I
that is
thought that
so
was
cool.
really interesting. And it was
It
really,
is.
and I think if we didn't start the season with Lost in Translation, I wouldn't have been as strong on this additional take.
Hmm.
But I think because we watched both of these films this year and is essentially like so close to each other,
Yeah.
um, it's it was really cool to see as an unintended, or maybe not so unintended,
Yeah. Absolutely. And
take
I think
on
that,
the film.
yeah, and that does work absolutely as an additional take because in addition to just everything that is in her, even and Rent Lost in Translation as well, but it's so much fun to watch these things with a new eye and a new ear, um, given the emotional context of the creators of the thing, you know? Because I remember when I was a kid, I always thought like, oh, this movie was just written and then it was made and then they moved on to the next one. I just thought that it was always going to be what it was going to be. From the
Yeah,
moment that the director or the writer conceived of it, it's like, that's the movie. You just make it and it is what it is. And then you move on with your life and then you make the next one, you know? But it's like, there's so much emotional depth and
yeah,
experience from your own life and from the life of these directors and writers and so on that they inject into these projects that give them the one of a kind nature that they ultimately uh, portray for us. And I get that now.
yeah,
And I also didn't get that as much even when I watched this like 10 or so years, 11 years ago. There is so much emotional depth that's brought into this, and that's what art is. Like, I
yeah.
get this now, right? Yeah, this is why it's so interesting and fun for us and everyone out there to watch people's art, because you're not just making a story, you're not just making a beginning, middle, and end. You're not just making a plot, putting a movie together with actors. These people are telling us who they are and how they view the world and how they understand what the hurdles of life are, and more importantly, what they even mean to
Yeah.
them. Specifically, this is what the hurdles meant to Sofia Coppola. This is what the same hurdles meant to Spike Jonze. But not even just raw, right? It's shrouded
Mhm.
inside a narrative that's constructed for meticulous purposes, and not just one purpose, not just this is what my relationship movie is or this is
Yeah.
what my divorce movie is. It's this is everything going on in my life at the time and all my experience along with all that other stuff, and no one else could have ever made this movie the way that I made it right now. It's a snapshot of who we are, and that's
It's it's
incredible.
it's a perfect example, both of these films, that I would tell to any aspiring filmmaker, any film student, when somebody says write what you know,
Hmm.
these are to me the go-to examples, because these are hyper specific situations
Yeah.
where these writers are writing what they know, but they're not self-indulgent.
Right.
They are they are very much the stories of the individuals writing them. And Coppola said it with Lost in Translation. She loves Tokyo. Like, she had been to Japan, I think, several times by that point.
Hmm.
And I think it's no accident that she intentionally chose to set it there. But she knew how to separate herself from it,
Yeah.
in the same
Yeah.
way that Spike Jonze knew what parts of himself to separate.
Yeah.
Because neither of these characters in these stories are filmmakers.
Yeah.
They knew how to take the things that they were going through and put them into a story that an audience could connect with
Yeah.
in a way that would not feel self-indulgent.
Yeah. And it makes it not just about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's this idea that we make movies, and I think Adam Sekafico was the first one that said this to me. I always find like every episode I'm telling a piece of Adam Sekafico wisdom or something. He needs to start his own YouTube channel, just casting out wisdom to the world. Um, he said one day something like, "We make our films, and once we make the film, it's not ours anymore. It becomes the world's. It's for everyone. We
Mm.
all share this thing. It's in the common marketplace of entertainment, right? Everyone accesses this. It's not yours. It might have started as your idea, but then when you make it and everyone can access it, that belongs to everyone. You bring yourself to it. And that's why we get things like personal takes, like we talk about on this podcast. But there's something amazing about that to me, that these people are able to take what
Yeah.
is so personal and so indescribable and then fit it inside, carve out some sort of creative space for it with their bare hands and place all of that very important emotional language and thoughts and expressions into this narrative. That's just amazing.